This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, May 13th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Nigerian lawmakers and property developers have raised concerns that a cement monopoly is keeping prices high and impeding construction, seen as crucial to the economic recovery of Africa's largest economy. Managing Editor Vincent Makori has our story.
Nigerian property developer Olawale Ayilara is grappling with spiraling costs. He is CEO of Lendway Investment, which is building 12,000 homes across 14 sites in the affluent Lekki district of Lagos. But the price of cement is soaring, raising concerns that construction, seen as crucial to the recovery of Africa's largest economy, is being impeded.
It has a large effect in what the price of building development will be right now in Nigeria. And it's a lot of problem because already prices are really skyrocketing, but this is due to, there's nothing the developers can do actually, but this is due to the raw materials of the likes of cement and then some other things.
Ayilara says cement prices rose by over a third in November. Lawmakers blame the dominance of three large firms. Dangote Cement, founded by Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, has 60.6% market share. Lafarge Africa, 21.8%. Boer Cement, 17.6%. That monopoly stems from an import ban that has been in place for most of the last 20 years. Its aim was to develop self-sufficiency in cement production. Joachim Macebong is a senior analyst at Lagos-based consultancy SMB Intelligence.
The fast way will be to allow import of cement into the country. The slow way will be to invite other cement players, the bigger cement players, who are more efficient with regard to how they run their plants and so on, and who can over time bring prices down.
Nigeria emerged from its second recession in 4 years in late 2020. A third of the labor force is unemployed. Ayilara says the government needs to intervene.
Monopoly or not, I feel that the government, they are still a very big player in regulating some of these things, and they have to come to the table and then make sure that they do what is fair by everybody.
Last month, Nigerian lawmakers urged a loosening of licensing restrictions to create the competition needed to drive down prices. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment did not respond to a request for comment on those calls. Vincent Makori, VOA News.
Egyptians said on Wednesday that attitudes towards women need to change to end sexual violence in the North African country after a high-profile gang rape case was shelved. Public prosecutors on Tuesday freed 4 suspects in a case involving a woman who said she was drugged and raped in 2014 at the Fairmont Hotel in the capital, Cairo. They cited insufficient evidence. Socially conservative attitudes in many parts of Egypt mean women are reluctant to report sexual violence and harassment for fear of being judged and blamed, and because they believe they're unlikely to get justice. A 2017 Thomson Reuters Foundation poll found Cairo to be the most dangerous megacity for women, and 99% of women in Egypt interviewed by the United Nations in 2013 reported sexual harassment. Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera warned on Wednesday that tobacco is in terminal decline and called for a switch to high-growth crops like cannabis. Julian Satterthwaite of Reuters reports.
Malawi President Lazarus Chakwera has warned that the country's lead foreign exchange earner, tobacco, is in terminal decline and urged a switch to cannabis and other high-growth crops instead. In a State of the Nation address on Wednesday, Chakwera said tobacco was expected to earn less than $200 million in 2021. That figure is roughly similar to the past 2 years, but well below previous annual earnings of up to $350 million. Clearly, we need to diversify and grow other crops like cannabis, he said, pointing out that the drug was legalized last year for industrial and medicinal use. Chakwera said that aside from tobacco, the agricultural sector was booming and would enable economic growth to recover 3.8% this year based on the latest forecasts. But decades of public health education have gradually convinced people worldwide of the dangers of tobacco. Malawi's parliament passed a bill in February 2020 making it legal to cultivate and process cannabis for medicines and hemp fibre used in industry. It stopped short of decriminalising recreational use. Countries around the world are relaxing laws on cannabis. That includes several in southern Africa, such as Zambia, Lesotho and Zimbabwe.
That report by Julian Satterthwaite of Reuters. The Ugandan and Congo armies are setting up an operations center in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo for a joint offensive against Islamist rebels who have killed hundreds of people in the last year, according to Congo's government. On Sunday, a delegation from the Ugandan People's Defense Force, including the commander of Uganda's ground forces, arrived in Beni in Congo's North Kivu province to establish a coordination center for the two armies, Kinshasa's communications ministry said on Wednesday. A Congo army spokesman was not immediately available for comment. A Ugandan army spokesman said he could not confirm the information given by Congo's government. The discovery of a child's burial site in a Kenyan cave dating back 78,000 years sheds new light on the emotional life of early men, the head of archaeology for Kenya's museum said on Wednesday. David Doyle of Reuters has our report.
In a cave near the Kenyan coast lies the body of a child. This is the oldest known human burial site, dating back around 78,000 years. According to the head of archaeology for Kenya's museums, Dr. Emmanuel Ndiema, on Wednesday, the discovery sheds new light on the emotional life of early Homo sapiens.
For a very long time, we have only been looking at the technology, the subsistence, the environment, but we are beginning to understand now this, having people having some emotional attachments to the dead, that they can be able to intentionally bury them.
Nicknamed Mtoto, or child in Swahili, the body had been placed in a shallow grave. The head was resting on a pillow, scientists say, and the upper part of the body was carefully wrapped in a shroud.
The age of the child is 2 to 3 years. That's what we approximate based on the dental formula. And also, but the specimen, the sediment itself is been dated to 78,000 years, and that actually falls within the time frame of called Homo sapiens, or anatomically modern human beings. So these are people like just you and me.
Mtoto was part of a hunter-gatherer culture, with remains of various antelope species and other prey found at the site. Also unearthed were stone tools and stone points that could be used as part of a spear. Ndiema said the discovery also shows early Homo sapiens lived in different parts of what is now Kenya. That contradicts a long-standing narrative that suggested early humans only settled in the Great Rift Valley, further west from the coast.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Ivory Coast Prime Minister Patrick Archie, aged 65, has been admitted to a hospital in Paris, where he was being treated for severe fatigue, according to two sources close to him. Archie, a close confidant of President Alassane Ouattara, was named Prime Minister in March following the death of the West African cocoa producer's second premier in less than 8 months. He visited France for health reasons last week, but left prematurely to participate in discussions about the electric power problems at home. He then returned to Paris on Tuesday, cancelling a tour of hydroelectric dams, according to sources. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken released the State Department's annual International Religious Freedom Report, singling out Iran, Myanmar, Russia, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, and China as some of the world's worst violators of what Blinken termed a core human right. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has the story.
China's systematic surveillance and massive detention of Uyghur Muslims is highlighted in this year's International Religious Freedom Report, as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced Wednesday.
China broadly criminalizes religious expression and continues to commit crimes against humanity and genocide against Muslim Uyghurs and members of other religious and ethnic minority groups. Today, I'm announcing the designation of Yu Wei, former office director of the so-called Central Leading Group Preventing and Dealing with Heretical Religions of Chengdu, for his involvement in gross violations of human rights, namely the arbitrary detention of Falun Gong practitioners. Yu Wei and his family are now ineligible for entry into the United States.
China rejects claims of genocide and crimes against humanity and says it is countering extremism in Xinjiang using vocational education centers. But senior State Department official Daniel Nadell said China has essentially turned the entire region into an open-air prison. Satellite images also document China's desecration and destruction of mosques in Xinjiang. Blinken also called out other offenders, including Iran and Russia, for targeting religious minorities.
In Nigeria, courts continue to convict people of blasphemy, sentencing them to long-term imprisonment or even death. Yet the government has still not brought anyone to justice for the military's massacre of hundreds of Shia Muslims in 2015. Saudi Arabia remains the only country in the world without a Christian church, though there are more than 1 million Christians living in Saudi Arabia.
Blinken also called on Saudi Arabia to free prisoners of conscience like blogger Raif Badawi, who was sentenced in 2014 to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes for allegedly insulting Islam and encouraging debate Riyadh found objectionable. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Let us know what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the fight against domestic abuse and sexual assault right here in the U.S. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. The United States improved from 48th to 44th last year in the Reporters Without Borders 2020 Press Freedom Ranking, but violent incidents committed by both authorities and civilians against journalists prompted law enforcement to team up with a non-profit to de-escalate tensions before tempers ran over. VOA's Arasha Basadi has more.
For journalists in Washington, the year started with the storming of the United States Capitol in January. Then a pro-Trump mob tore down barricades and attacked journalists in their gear. That violence against journalists followed a summer in which millions protested the police killing of George Floyd, and police clashed sometimes violently with protesters and press. So Georgia law enforcement officials and the Georgia chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, or SPJ, saw the opportunity for a teaching moment.
What we have here is a protest situation where police are needing to diffuse the protesters. They're entering an area where they shouldn't, or things are starting to get violent and they need to. It's no longer peaceful.
I'm here live on the scene of a protest.
Former president of the Georgia SPJ, Charlotte Norsworth, appears in this training video as a reporter before a mock crowd of protesters hostile toward police. The course at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center guides law enforcement to de-escalation instead of conflict, but it also teaches journalists to respect legal boundaries. Chad Wilson is Division Director for Basic Training. He says the program helps bridge the divide between law enforcement and media.
You really get to see that it's not just a person with a microphone in your face, or it's not just a person with a camera. From our perspective, they're human beings just like we are. And then from the media perspective, I think it's also important that they got to see that, there's a human being standing behind that shield wearing that helmet. And at the end of the day, we all want to just do our job.
Both Norsworth and Wilson agree there is growing mistrust between journalists and law enforcement as police have increasingly become the subject of protest. Still, both are quick to call this training a well-received step in the right direction.
Well, I think so far it's been way more successful than we thought it was going to be to start with.
Police and journalists have rights that start and end at very specific time frames. And it is a two-way street that requires participation and respect from both police and the press. It won't work without that.
If we get nothing other than just open lines of communication out of this, I think we've done more than a lot of people have ever gotten done.
Justice! Wilson says the training also exposes officers from more rural areas to media presence they would typically not encounter. The physical program is new, but online training modules are available to all Georgia law enforcement. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has asked Congress for an unprecedented $1 billion to fight violence against women, including domestic abuse and sexual assault. VOA's Mike O'Sullivan reports on the challenges so many survivors face.
A trauma shielded too long by shame and silence, more and more people are raising their voices to combat violence against women, from Washington to South Asia and Europe. As once respected figures in entertainment and other professions, including former USA Olympics team doctor Larry Nassar, face consequences for sexual assaults, traumatized survivors struggle.
I'm angry with myself for not recognizing the abuse, and that's something I'm struggling with today.
That's a common response, says a women's rights activist who was sexually assaulted as a college student.
I remember at the time feeling like, oh, is what happened to me a crime or not? And I think that's a very common reaction for a lot of survivors, because violence against women is so normalized.
Other young victims are trafficked for prostitution or pornography, sometimes by acquaintances, increasingly by street gangs.
They're gang raped. They're beaten beyond, belief. They're addicted to drugs. They're chained to furniture. They're put in cages.
And sometimes coerced into involvement in major crimes, including shootings and robberies. Abusers can have a psychological hold over their victims, which workers in the field call a trauma bond, says a survivor of domestic sex trafficking who helps other survivors.
Now imagine that bond starting in a 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old girl, and going, for most of their life, just with a continuum of different faces attached to it.
An international study says nearly half of young victims of human trafficking are trafficked by family members.
You're just seeing the system break down in so many ways that these kids are either ending back with their family member who is trafficking them. They might end up in foster care and then run away and end up on the streets.
Whether victims of trafficking or domestic violence, survivors need comprehensive help, says a charity worker who oversees transitional housing for Muslim women and others.
Oftentimes these women have been held captive almost, have no savings, have no really employable job skills.
Some women and trafficked teenagers are drawn into prostitution or pornography, or they struggle in one homeless shelter after another.
It's really difficult when you have a woman who, maybe has left an abusive marriage, is trying to make a better life for herself or for her children, but every day she's exposed to someone in the shelter who's, actively abusing drugs or alcohol, or people who have severe mental health issues.
What is needed? They say long-term housing, education, and emotional support. To that end, they say more government funding will not solve the problem, but will help. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News.
Washington plans to lift many coronavirus restrictions and aims for a full reopening by mid-June. The U.S. Capitol has already vaccinated more than 70% of its residents. Saqib Al-Islam reports on a unique vaccine drive in the city.
It's a beautiful May evening at The Reach, a new outdoor facility at the Kennedy Center, a performing art complex, where people are lining up to get vaccinated.
I just wanted an easy way to get the vaccine, and this was about as simple as I got. I rode my bike here. It was perfect.
But there are added perks for getting vaccine shots here, which are free of charge and administered on a walk-up basis.
Ready? Yeah. What are you doing this weekend?
People get a jab in the arm and a free beer too.
There you go. Congratulations on your vaccine. Cheers.
A combination that drew Jonathan, who is visiting the city.
I actually learned about this by watching a TV commercial about an hour ago while sitting in my hotel. So I do travel a lot, so it's very hard for me to try and schedule 2 shots at once. Being able to come down and get this done, which means I can continue traveling and I can continue traveling safely. A free cup of beer isn't a bad idea either.
Those who didn't really care about the beer were still enticed by the convenience of a single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
People either want the vaccine or they don't, and so incentivizing someone with beer, I don't think is gonna, change much. But it was, again, that coupled with we want to see the reach, we have this societal pressure, it's just one shot, at least it's traditional, we got a beer, so it's all of that
and fresh
together
air,
and fresh air,
just to work out, they did a very good job of this.
Yeah.
Washington's local government and a regional brewing company teamed up with the Kennedy Center for the event named Take the Shot DC, Get a Beer.
There you go, and congratulations on your vaccine.
I think the beer is just a bonus when you come to get your vaccine. It happened very quickly, within 48 hours, so I think it was mainly the mayor's office who made it happen.
Did you need a getting Johnson & Johnson today?
Public vaccination events like these are an effort to help achieve the goals set by President Joe Biden to get 70% of the U.S. population at least first shot of COVID-19 vaccination by July 4th.
We've got sites across the district that are going to be open every day on a set schedule. But we're also going to have pop-up events like this in order to make sure that our residents have the clear knowledge that the vaccine is free, that it's accessible, and it could even be fun.
City healthcare workers who registered vaccine recipients called the event a success.
I wasn't sure how the turnout would be, but we've had a great turnout. Patients seem really, really eager to get the vaccine. I think any of these events are great. Anything that makes it more accessible to the public.
This week, Washington is ending capacity limits for restaurants, places of worship, gyms, pools, libraries, weddings, and other events. Restrictions for large sports and entertainment venues are expected to be lifted next month. Saqib Al-Islam, VOA News, Washington.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Fermilab near Chicago is probing the unseen forces that make up the basic building blocks of all matter and life. VOA's Ken Farabaugh reports the project could change scientists' understanding of particle physics and the very fabric of the universe.
For decades, the so-called Standard Model in physics has been the gold standard outlining what scientists know about the basic subatomic building blocks of everything known to man. Over the years, they have identified 17 fundamental particles and 3 forces.
It's the electromagnetic force, the weak force, which is connected to nuclear decay, and then also the strong force, which is what basically holds, your protons and your neutrons inside of the nucleus and basically makes everything that we are, the structure that we are.
Renee Fatimi is a professor of physics at the University of Kentucky and is part of an international team at Fermilab outside Chicago. Partnering with the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN, in Switzerland, the team is trying to unlock the subatomic secrets of the universe.
There's always this force, and it's a question of tapping into it. We're trying to figure out the new forces and particles.
An experiment at Fermilab aims to tap into the unknown. Of particular interest is the muon, one of 17 particles similar to an electron, a byproduct of cosmic rays. Muons constantly blanket Earth's surface. Fermilab used a specially designed 14-meter circular magnetic track to study how muons move through space. Data from billions of tests are challenging fundamental principles of the Standard Model, known to generations of physicists.
We got a real hint, a real possibility that there could be a breakdown of all the fundamental things that we thought we knew.
Marcela Carrena, head of theoretical physics at Fermilab, says the experiment is detecting phenomena that cannot be explained by the model that physicists constructed in the 1970s and updated as recently as 2012. Specifically, some unknown force or particle is interacting with muons in ways not predicted by the Standard Model. So, what exactly is it? Carrena says data collected at Fermilab could hold the answer. Analysis has only just begun, but hints at the possibility of a major discovery.
There could be one or more particles that are starting to talk with the muon.
I knew that this result could be possibly a watershed moment for physicists. I mean, it's like finally now we have a hint of where to go next.
The particle breakthrough has led to a surge of interest in Fatimi's work.
Talking about muons and standard models, I mean, nobody talks about that over dinner, right? But hey, now they do, and that's super cool.
While Fermilab's muon experiment continues, Marcela Carrena says the next phase of research could yield more clues by smashing or colliding the particles together. Doing that might require more advanced technology than Fermilab's accelerator or even the Large Hadron Collider at CERN's facility in Europe. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Batavia, Illinois.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.